This is episode number 162 of the Guns Magazine podcast. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast, one of the shooting world's biggest gun talk programs. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting, hunting, law enforcement, and the firearms industry. But before we get started, here's a quick word about our sponsor, the R7 Mako by Kimber. The striker-fired R7 Mako is a high-capacity polymer micro-compact from Kimber. With the R7 Mako, you get 12 and 14-round total capacity from flush and extended magazines, while the performance carry trigger has the smooth pull and clean break you'd expect from a high-end single-action handgun. The R7 Mako also comes optics ready, or you can have it with optics already installed. Kimber's R7 Mako will feed your appetite for something different. See how at r7mako.com. Okay, I'll admit the title might seem a little on the clickbait side, but it actually has a serious bit of truth behind it. In today's episode, I'm talking with my sometimes partner in crime and the editor of American Handgunner magazine, Tom McHale, about safety tips while you're reloading. Now, let's get on to the deadly mistakes with Tom McHale. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning.
Well, thanks for joining us as we talk about the deadliest mistakes of reloading. Okay, is that a little bit of a clickbait title, maybe?
Yeah, not really. I mean, reloading done correctly is perfectly safe and nothing particularly risky about it. But like driving, you have to follow the rules and stay between the lines.
Exactly. And when I came up with that title, you and I were talking, and I said, well, yeah, we'll just kind of talk about the big mistakes. And you pointed out you can do some serious damage if you don't follow through with the right procedures and all that. So I guess to answer my question off the top, not really clickbaity, but again, I emphasize
you know how I like
safe.
to think about it?
How's that?
Think about the pressures involved. You know, you're looking at little tiny bullets and this and that. And yeah, they go fast out the fiery end, but think about the pressures. So a rifle cartridge could be 55, 60,000 PSI. Now I look out my window at my 2003 Toyota Sequoia sitting in the driveway, still running, by the way. And I fill up the tires with air with 32 to 34 pounds per square inch.
Right.
And I'm not really crazy about going out there and stabbing a knife in the tire. I feel like that's probably won't end well for me.
Yeah.
That's 30 some pounds per inch.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking anywhere from 20,000 to 60,000 pounds per square inch of pressure.
Yeah.
So that's some serious stuff going on there, right?
Well, have you ever had an air hose blow out on a compressor? I have, and it's spectacular what happens.
Yeah.
And that's 100 pounds.
Well, I saw a video on online the other day of it was a woman with a pressure washer. And squeezed. She just wasn't ready for it.
Yeah.
Just kind of standing back on her heels or something and squeezed the thing and literally just went flying. That's a hose.
Yeah.
Come on, not an exploding cartridge. So.
Yeah, and I think those run like 300, 400, 500 PSI. So yeah, we're
I don't even know
magnitudes of power way beyond that. So good point. So I guess we've done our obligatory safety briefing before we get started, which is don't do dumb stuff. I heard a guy say the other day, a pilot, don't do different, dumb, or dangerous. I thought, okay, that covers a lot.
That's a good reloading mantra right there.
Yeah, different, dumb, or dangerous.
If it's not published in an official book somewhere, or if you're not within a range that's published somewhere, maybe don't do it, right?
Having said that, all of our experts, what's the first thing they start talking about? Well, when I stuffed it full of rifle powder and put it in my 25 ACP. This is for informational purposes only. Don't try this at home, kids. Okay. Our lawyer somewhere is, done clutching his chest, I suppose. But anyway. Well, Okay, let's talk about the deadliest mistakes. And again, I was being kind of facetious about that, but as Tom said, that can be a real thing. So let's talk about that first dangerous part, the idea of maybe overcharging your cases.
Yeah, and obviously this varies with every caliber and load, between handgun, rifle, black powder is a whole different thing, and shotgun. But just sticking to the handgun side, it's not very hard to overcharge a case. I mean, a lot of the loads that I reload in handgun calibers might fill up a half or less than half of the available case volume.
Mm-hmm.
So, it all depends on which powder you use and what kind of pressure velocity curve you're going after. But there is plenty of room to do that with a large number of loads.
And for those that are novices to reloading, and I would put myself in that category. I reload now. I've only got a couple of years experience, but what's the most common reason for folks to maybe overcharge?
Attention span.
What were you saying, Tom?
Attention span.
Oh, okay.
It took me a minute, but I see what you did there.
Yeah.
And I'm impressed.
That was a gag. Yeah.
No, it brings up a great point. I have an area in my place. There's no TV there. I'll listen to music, but no television there because especially if you're working with a progressive reloader of any kind, a turret or a automated progressive reloader, when something hangs up or you stop and then restart, it is very easy to double charge, 2 powder loads in one case. And as I said a minute ago, with a lot of those loads, they'll fit. So unless you're watching every cartridge go by and paying attention, it can happen.
Yeah.
Bad news.
Well, yeah. And some good advice I got from a couple reloaders when I was learning how is I don't use a progressive. I still use a single stage, but I use a loading block. And the final check before you're going to put the bullet in is I take a flashlight and I visually inspect every case. I usually run them in 50s or thereabouts. I just make sure that that's about half full, topped off. And I've seen that maybe once or twice when I lost focus. And it's easy to do. You don't lose focus on number 1. You typically don't lose focus on number 50. But somewhere 30, 40, focus does tend to fail.
Or 100 or 200.
Yeah, exactly.
And even in a progressive, I've got 2 progressive presses that I use. And on both of them, I've rigged up a lighting source and system so that I can very clearly see that stage where the cartridge, moves into place with a powder charge in it. So even in a progressive setup, I'm eyeballing every single case that goes in there.
Attention to detail.
There's another really good tip that I like to do. Sometimes you have to use a certain powder for whatever reason. You may be going after certain performance characteristics, but I like to choose, because there's a huge variety of options. I like to choose loads that fill up at least half the case or more. I could, for example, I could use a charge of Bullseye that may just take a very small quantity of powder for the same pressure and velocity, or I'll say Trail Boss. I'm using an extreme example here, right? Or Unique, it takes a larger volume to achieve the same result. And, rather than worry about conceivable penny savings on a powder charge, I like to see it. And, ideally, if you're working with a charge that fills up half or more of a case, it gets really hard to double charge because powder is literally at the top of the case or even overflowing.
Yeah.
If you do have a double charge situation. So something to think about. Choose your powders with safety in mind.
Excellent point. And, I was just sitting here thinking, again, as a novice reloader, but I can also liken this to dry firing. It requires that same focus and attention. And when people have accidents dry firing, typically what happens is they get done and the phone rings or somebody knocks on the door or something happens and they come back and they're still mentally in that, well, I was dry firing. Let me pick up the gun and do a couple more, and bang. And, it's kind of the same thing of, well, maybe you're done or maybe you're close to being done or whatever. And then something happens and you come back and, I guess I didn't charge that last, case or whatever. Well, you may have some fun in your hand when you get to the range.
It's, everybody that I teach reloading to, I say get a kinetic bullet puller, one of those hollow hammers where you stick the cartridge in and you can pull a bullet out. Because if you ever run into that situation where you go, did I see that one?
Yeah.
Am I sure? Or if you have to stop and start or whatever, and you've got a loaded cartridge sitting there that you're unsure about, pull the bullet.
Yep.
You can save everything. You don't waste a single component by doing that. You waste 60 seconds of your time, and it's just not worth it to not be sure. And
I can say I've personally done that, and there was nothing wrong, but after you pull the bullet, it's like, okay, I was fine. And then you do that little mental kick yourself. Oh, you should have just shot it. And then you think, no, especially on a large caliber rifle, the stakes are pretty high. You get the bolt back in your eyeball. That's not a good day.
Yeah. You think about in a rifle scenario, just the way you're holding that thing, it's the chamber is pretty close to your face.
Yeah.
So,
well, who was it that said basically you're putting a pipe bomb next to your face and setting it off and hoping that everything works out? So, yeah. Something to think about. Well, that's a great tip, but let's talk about some of the other stuff. You are the guru of reloading here at FMG. So what's your next tip, Tom?
Well, I'm not a guru. I just haven't blown myself up yet.
Don't say that. You know what happens when you say stuff like that?
I know. So I'm going to go do some reloading this afternoon.
Okay.
But what scares me more than anything is more than an overcharge scenario is an undercharge. I personally, I think those are worse.
Okay.
If you think about it, you either end up loading a cartridge with nothing, just a primer only, or with a too light powder charge. And that in itself, if you're in a single shot environment, isn't a big deal, right? I mean, worst case, the bullet doesn't even make it into the barrel or partway through the barrel and sits there. It's not going to blow up. However, the shot behind it that is a fully charged cartridge will blow up. I mean, just look at some of the guns. You find plenty of pictures online of people who have fired, into an obstructed barrel.
Yeah.
And you think about, especially with handgun shooting, oftentimes you're pulling that trigger pretty fast, right? Bang, 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 bang. You got to be real cognizant of the possibility of a squib load. I mean, if you can catch yourself by hearing that muffled report instead of a big bang in time, my hat's off to you. But I'm not sure that's realistic all the time. So,
well, if you remember 2 years ago when I had my little mishap, I did a podcast on that, calling it The Day I Got Shot, and I didn't know we were going to talk about it, so I didn't look it up, but I'll have that in the show notes. But basically, that's exactly what happened. I had a round that didn't detonate, and unfortunately, when I ran the bolt on this gun that shall remain nameless, the extractor didn't work. So I still had a live round in the chamber, and I went and did my usual immediate action drill, ran the bolt, and when I released the bolt to go forward, and this particular gun has a real strong recoil spring, and it takes, as I said, 3 men and a boy to get this bolt back, and I did that and let it go, and it picked up that next round and drove it right into the chamber, and hey, both of them went off. So that wasn't a squib per se, but it was just one of those things that I think the key takeaway was my immediate action drill that I've performed hundreds, if not thousands of times. When you have a misfire or a failure to fire, you run the bolt, run the slide, whatever flavor of gun you're shooting, and get back in the fight, right? Well, yeah, I got a fight all right back at the ER as they were x-raying my belly and trying to decide how far that fragment went in me.
I won't mention the name, but I believe that was a 45 ACP, right?
It was.
Okay, so let's stop there. You got shot, blood everywhere, bullet fragment in your guts with a 45 ACP mishap. Now, 45 sounds powerful to a lot of people, but in terms of reloading and pressure, we're talking off the top of my head, 17,000 to low 20s of thousands of PSI pressure. It's about as mild as you get, in a center fire cartridge rifle or pistol reloading scenario.
Yep.
And look what that did to you.
Yeah, I don't want to be around for something hotter. It was, and the interesting thing is doing the reconstruction, what happened was the fragment hit the angled lip of the receiver. So this fragment that went into my belly and went 1 millimeter from punching into my intestines actually hit the angled lip of the receiver, pulled a 90, and then went through my clothes into my belly. So it actually, how much energy did it expend hitting that and then going right angle and coming back at me? So, it's one of the, I don't think about it too much because it could have been a lot worse, and fortunately it wasn't. So life goes on. But as you said, that's a pretty mediocre in terms of pressures. So if I'd been shooting, some kind of Magnum or a rifle caliber,
or 308 or something, or 5.56,
I'd have probably stopped about my spine or maybe through and through. I don't know. So, okay, I don't want to reload anymore now. Just be careful.
You just have to give yourself procedures and tips, something you can do to and this could apply to over and under charges. You can do is weigh your cartridges after, if you want to do a special check. Now, here's a very important caveat. You will be shocked and amazed at the brass weight variances between different head stamps of brass. Yep. So for weighing to mean anything, you've got to be using the same brass, like Sorcher brass, if you want to do that approach. And then you can weigh accurately enough to know if you have a significant variance in the powder weight.
Yep. And a lot of guys that are precision rifle shooters will weigh them. And even the same head stamp, there'll be some significant differences sometimes in overall case weight. And I guess I've never got into volume checking. You need some special equipment to do that. But even volumes can vary quite a bit in the same line of cases, even in the same lot.
Yep. And you'll see, manufacturers can get away with the weighing scenarios and stuff because they know exactly what they're working with in a given lot of brass and bullets and powder. It's kind of fascinating to look at how the pros do it. I've seen setups in ammo factories with super precise scales that are weighing at different stages through the reloading process. Mm-hmm. I've seen laser setups that kind of sweep a tray of cartridges looking for primers, depth scenarios. Are they too high, to inset too much? And, it's fascinating stuff. Now you can't put lasers into your home reloading system, but what you can do are things like you described earlier, scan the tray, scan the open cases with a flashlight before you seat bullets. One thing I do is, after I load a batch and they're sitting there in the little bucket, off the press, is I put them in plastic ammo boxes, one by one, primers up. Mm-hmm. I usually, depending on the caliber, I usually put the bullet down and the primer up because that gives me one more scan of each cartridge going into the box, and I can kind of eyeball the primer, make sure one didn't get upside down or I'm missing one or who knows what. So,
and it's amazing, like you said, the millions and millions of rounds of ammo that are manufactured every day, especially, like the federal plant up in Anoka and Winchester and all that, versus the failure rate. And we've all had failure to fire, bad rounds, but the percentage of them versus the millions of rounds they churn out every single day is really pretty unbelievable. The failure rate compared to maybe general manufacturing has got to be so much lower than, building widgets or even hammers probably, because it's amazing. They churn that stuff out really fast and it works most of the time. So you need to be that precise when you're reloading at home.
Yeah, I think with quality factory ammo, I can remember, I have had a couple of rounds, but they were out of the same lot that failed to ignite.
Yeah.
And I'm talking with, you get that depending, that could be the gun, it could be a light primer strike, but I'm talking with a proper primer strike and, all of that ruled out. And it turned out it was a new setup, a manufacturer up in a new line, and they had issues with primers. And that was the only time in decades that I can recall what I would classify as a ammo failure.
Yeah.
From quality manufactured stuff.
And one other point I wanted to touch on, if anybody has a laser set up in their home reloading bay, it's got to be Tom McHale.
I'm working on it. It's a tough DIY project. Maybe, you know what? Maybe we'll put that in our next DIY issue. Maybe we can come up with some automated ways to check your ammo as you're reloading at home. That's actually kind of a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Those are two good tips. Overcharge, undercharge. Make sure you're paying attention. What's our next one?
Powder. And this is, I think it's so tempting, especially in days of powder availability problems, to want to swap and switch and all that. It's fine, provided you're using powder that is tested and certified for use in a certain load.
Right.
So one thing that I like to do, at home, is I'm fanatical about my powder positioning. Now, what I mean by that is I have a separate shelf, a couple of shelves where I store all my powders. They are not anywhere on my reloading bench. It's a separate set of corner shelves. So they're not really usable when they're sitting there, in their storage position. So I only have one out at a time, next to the press that I'm using at that moment. And, you just have to be absolutely sure that what is in the hopper, depending on your setup, you may be going direct, as you said, in a single stage environment where you're, loading cartridge by cartridge. But if you're in a progressive scenario, you've got some sort of hopper filled up with powder. On my bench, you'll see one bottle on the bench. And when I leave that room, whether it's for an hour or a day or 2 weeks, the powder in the hopper goes back in the bottle, and the bottle goes back on the shelf. So there is no powder on my bench.
Yeah.
Right. Because again, you hit the nail on the head with the scenario you described earlier of going off to do something else and coming back and wondering, what was the status again? I think it's good. I'm pretty sure that's what's in there.
Yeah.
You just can't risk it. Just using the wrong powder can blow up your gun equally well.
We've said it a couple times, and it just kind of struck me. The words "I think" should be a giant red danger flag. Anytime you're reloading, if you stop and go, I think, right there, stop. Just stop, back up to the last known point, and then go from there. Because when you start saying "I think," that means you don't know. And if you don't know, you may get a real unpleasant surprise somewhere down the road.
Yep. Absolutely.
I came up with an actual rule on my own. I think. I may put that on a little, have my wife embroider it, how they used to do embroidery and all that. Hang it on the wall. I think, with a big red, the circle and the red line through it.
Hey, let's talk about another rule.
Yes, go ahead.
That's real easy for you and I.
Well, for you, maybe.
Wear glasses.
Okay. Yeah, I like to see, so that's kind of important.
Yeah, it sounds like overkill, at first. Say, wear safety glasses when reloading. I've got my normal glasses are impact resistant, so I'm kind of good to go there, and I have to have them to see what I'm doing. So it's easy for me.
Yeah.
But if you're one of the fortunate ones who has had LASIK or doesn't need glasses at all, be sure and put something on.
Yeah.
Especially when doing things like priming. I mean, that can get very exciting, handling small, thin metal devices that are designed to blow up under stress, right?
Yeah. Well, I got to say, I started with the Lee loader, still using it occasionally if I just need a few rounds. And, seating the primer, you basically put the primer down on the jig and you set the casing over it, and then you hit it with a hammer. And the first dozen times I did that, I'm like, oh my Lord. And, I wore the full grinding shield. Yeah, exactly. Never had a problem. It's well designed. If you've got any qualms about the Lee loader, don't. It works great. But it takes a little getting used to. And the guy that was teaching me, I said, you want me to hit that with a hammer? Yeah, that's fine. I'm like, I notice you're getting away while I do this. Because no, it's fine. It's fine. And it is.
Yeah, I'm leaving the room. You go ahead and try it.
Exactly. I'll come back and clean up the mess. So, but yeah, primers, they're very safe, but yet, I always, when I'm doing the hand priming tool, I always think, I've never had it where something got sideways and I went a little too hard and set one off, but it's always in the back of my mind. So I definitely wear glasses or sometimes like I said, I've got my grinding face shield if I'm feeling really nervous.
There you go. It doesn't take much to be careful with that. I mean, I use, for most of my rifle cartridges that I reload, I actually use a hand priming tool. Right. That RCBS universal priming tool is just about the handiest thing ever. I absolutely love it. But even that, there are little things you think about it and say, okay, when I squeeze the lever here, hold the thing and angle it so it's not pointed at your face.
Yeah. Don't look down.
It is nice to look down and see it happening, but point it the other way when you squeeze that handle.
Yeah. I'd work that out. And you say that and everybody be like, nobody's that stupid. But yeah, your mind starts to wander and you think, is that working?
Yeah.
Because I've found myself looking too closely at times and thinking, how about you get that away from your face? Things could happen.
It's natural. I mean, a primer hangs up in the feed or something, or it's not, you're squeezing it, it's not going in right. Your first instinct is just to look at it. Say, what's happening? What's going wrong here?
Yeah. Wouldn't you like to be on the receiving end of that lecture at the ER? You did what? And now you're here? At what point did you think that was a good idea? Well, I didn't think.
Yeah, I had the open case mouth aimed right at my face, and I squeezed this handle.
Well, facial tattoos are all the rage now, so you'll have one in the shape of buckshot.
Yep.
But, well, those are great tips. Let's move on. What's the next one?
You know what? I think next I would add a general procedural practice, and we kind of almost touched on it just a second ago, and it's the concept of layering. When we talk about, you're a former cop, you probably are intuitive at the layering concept. But, when you think about personal defense or protecting your home, you think in layers, right? But lights on the outside, you put a lock on the door, those things. So multiple layers. I like to apply the same concept to reloading. And I like to tweak my process and kind of design my process so that I have layers of opportunity to catch things that may have gone wrong, or to just be sure I'm doing them right in the first place.
Yep.
One layer for you in your single stage press is that flashlight over the open tray, over the loaded tray of powdered cases, right? Yeah. That's a layer. Yep. A layer for me, another layer for me is looking at the primers. They go in the ammo box. One of the last layers for me is clearly labeling each and every ammo box that I load with what it is, what the bullet is, what the powder is. You don't know how long it's going to sit on your shelf.
Yep. And
are you really going to remember exactly what you did 2 years from now?
2 years. This morning for me.
2 days?
Yeah. And I've run into that. It's like, oh, I forgot I reloaded those. What powder did I have? So you got to look at the little note you made yourself. And in the cases where I've forgotten to put the note, because, I'll do that here in a few minutes and you forget, but at least I keep the reloading log so I can figure out, that lot had this powder and bullet and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it's the faintest writing is better than the strongest mind.
It's true. I've wrote a little program on my computer using some database software. I have every load I have ever assembled or have learned about or decided to document to try one day. It's got all the details. It's got a load number, a unique load number for each. It's got all the ingredients. It's got performance characteristics for ones I've actually shot, what its accuracy was and velocity and all that stuff. So I know, I can go back and I can refer to that. I know
Absolutely.
What's good, what's bad, again, documentation.
Yep. And, I'm reminded of you're a pilot, Tom, and I'm an armchair aviation enthusiast. I never got that far, but maybe someday. But
I'm not that far yet.
Okay.
I only got partway through, but
okay, that's more than I've.
But there's an analogy there, though. I mean,
well, I was going to say I watch a lot of videos, and for some reason, even though I fly a lot, I watch a lot of accident videos and discussions of how they investigate them and the causes of various accidents that are in the news. And I guess it's pretty common in the aviation world is the Swiss cheese model, that if you've got all these pieces of Swiss cheese, you got to get all the holes to line up for something to happen. And that's basically saying that, if you forgot to put gas in the plane, but somebody catches it or you catch it during checklist, the holes didn't line up. But every accident generally has several things that all have to line up at the right space and time and sequence for something bad to happen. And that's the key to it. And whether you're flying or reloading or doing whatever is have enough layers, as you said, built in that if something you get to step 4 and it's not lining up, okay, there may be a problem here. And that's just that idea that set enough filters, so to speak, so that you can't just walk from point A to point Z and have an accident. You had to have a whole bunch of stuff line up, and the odds are with each layer, it's not going to line up.
Well, and there are two types of layers, and you have to use both. And what I mean by that is the manufacturers of reloading gear have their own layers, like that nifty little hand tool, priming tool I talked about, like many others of similar design, has a chute that's maybe, I don't know, I've never measured it, maybe an inch long, that kind of separates the supply of primers waiting to go into the feeder to the one actually being fed. And the idea is that, if the one being fed goes off, it reduces the chances of an exciting little chain reaction of all the others going off. And
honestly,
like your press that you described, it feeds one at a time. Progressive loading presses have a little sliding bar, usually of some sort, that take primers from one area and scoot them over an inch or two or more into where, the thing is going to get used or inserted into the case. So there are all kinds of examples of stuff like that in reloading gear, but you can't rely on that. Kind of like a pilot can't rely on the gas gauge, in private aviation, you're going out, you're checking it, in the wing tanks, right? And like, you don't rely on the safety in a gun. You still don't point it at somebody. Yep. So you got to add your own layers in addition to the hardware layers that are in place.
Unless you're Alec Baldwin.
That's right. Well, he's exempt. So.
Too soon? Yeah, too soon. Okay. Okay, before you start writing the hate mail, I'm not saying that's funny, but it is ironic, okay?
Yeah, no layers.
Yeah, no layers.
Not enough layers.
Yep. And unfortunately, he's paying a price, but not that much compared to the poor woman that died. And the other guy, the director of photography, I think he was, that got shot. So, yeah, the guy that did the stupid thing, he's going to have, some problems in life, but at least he's alive. The other people paid a far higher price. So,
right.
Well, Tom, in the time remaining we've got left, any other do or die kind of reloading tips?
Focus. You know what? If you're going to reload your own ammunition, enjoy it and appreciate the process. Mm-hmm. If it's a chore for you and you're looking at your phone or you're watching TV while you're doing it, don't do it. Buy your ammo from a store.
Yep.
Right. If you can go down to your reloading press and enjoy the process and, kind of live in that moment, great. More power to you. Develop your procedures, but focus on what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's all it takes.
Yep. And it's funny because everybody that's taught me how to reload or I've discussed it with has said the exact same thing. When it gets to be a drudge or work, either don't do it or stop. And that's for me. I get 50 cases in and it's like, I'm not really enjoying this. I want to go do something else. Then stop. Because that 51st case will probably be the one you do something dumb or different or dangerous. So
I like that. I'm going to steal that. What was it? Different, dumb, or dangerous?
Yeah. Dumb, different, or dangerous. The 3Ds. And yeah, I saw that, like I said, on a video, and I guess it's fairly widespread in the military aviation community because that's what he said. I think it was Air Force. He said, just don't do dumb, different, or dangerous. And yeah, they're absolutely right. That kind of
good rules to live by.
Fixes most things. So, well, Tom, you are the editor of American Handgunner, and you work on our special editions. You also let's plug your side gig. You've written a book about reloading.
I have the Practical Guide to Reloading Ammunition, and it is available wherever. Amazon, of course, Barnes and Noble, other iBooks, if you're an e-reader for Apple devices, find it anywhere.
I keep saying I'm going to get it and read it, but I just dove in head first. And
I haven't sent you one.
No, you haven't. Yeah, we covered that.
Let's edit that part out.
Okay. Not. No, you said you were going to, and you got sidetracked. We're both a tad bit busy.
I was focused on my reloading at the time, so I couldn't break my attention span.
Exactly. Well, Tom, thank you. Those are all great tips to stay safe while you're reloading, and I will remember that. The layers, the dumb, dangerous, different, and having focus.
And I'm taking away dumb, different, dangerous.
Yeah.
I like it.
Exactly. Well, Tom, thanks for talking. And now we both have to get back to committing journalism.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Tom is always a great guest, and I hope we drove home the point of not doing anything dumb, dangerous, or different whenever you reload. If you like this episode, here's a couple more you might also find interesting. During this episode, I mentioned the day I ended up in the hospital after an accidental discharge. You can listen to my take on that day during episode number 130, titled The Day I Got Shot. We've also done shows on reloading tips, such as episode number 131 on how to reload pistols, 132 on rifle reloading, and, of course, episode number 133 on tips for reloading shotguns. If there's a topic you want to hear, someone you'd like us to interview, or you just want to share your thoughts, please drop me a line at editor@gunsmagazine.com. As always, you can find us on your favorite podcast directory, such as Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, and several others. And also there's YouTube, and of course at gunsmagazine.com. You can also subscribe to the companion Gun Cranks audio podcast on those same directories, or you can watch it at the Gun Cranks YouTube channel. And while you're online, don't forget to check out our great sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com, AmericanCop.com, and of course our numerous special editions available for sale on our websites and at Amazon. Of course, they all make great Christmas gifts. I'd also like to remind you to check our sponsor, the R7 Mako by Kimber. Visit them at r7mako.com. That's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. For the entire staff at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat. Now get out there and get shooting.